Welcome back to Just Giants with Grump and the Cranky Fan, your favorite Giants podcast. I'm your host, the Football Grump. With me, as always, is Mike the Cranky Fan, and we are back to do another episode after a head coach has been fired. How many is this now? We went through you and
This is
I. We
three.
did we did Ben McAdoo. We've done Pat Shermer. We've done Joe Judge, and now we're doing Brian Daboll.
Oh my God. We've done more shows about coaching firings than we've had playoff wins
Oh, by by
by far.
four, by
Yeah.
4 times. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, so
it's
Brian Daboll fired following a loss to the Bears 24-20 in Chicago in snowy weather. Um, Joe
I think we're
Schoen is been retained. We've been told that he is going to stay retained. Um, so I guess let's start with this. What percentage shocked were you to find out that Brian Daboll was fired on Monday?
I I had it at 90% shocked. I really was surprised. The first person, no, everybody rushes to text me to try to be first. And the first person who texted me is someone I consider very unreliable in there. So I thought maybe he saw it in the Onion or something, but then all of a sudden the flood of text came and I'm like, goddamn. I'm down here in Florida this week, taking care of Cranky Dad. He's doing well. But so I was not exactly, my finger completely on the pulse of everything. But I was shocked, and we'll get into the reasons why I was shocked, as we go through this episode. But I can understand the most important thing, Grump, and I think I need to say this before we go into the rest of the show, is I try to live my life by a very important axiom that more than one thing can be right at once, even if it appears contradictory. So we'll get into the reasons why and everything, but to me, we needed to get rid of him as our head coach. I've said it all the season. I didn't want him back, but the timing right now to me is curious. But we'll talk more about that as we go.
So yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I was 85% shocked. I think it was a done deal that he was fired after this year. Um,
Mhm.
but this did feel a little bit early to me. There was some, rumors out there that he was almost fired after the Broncos game, and John Mara had to be talked off a ledge. Um, this does feel a little bit like a rage firing. Um,
Mhm.
but let's talk about Brian Daboll though, because I
Mhm.
agree. I definitely think that it was time to go, and I like Brian Daboll in a lot of senses, right? Like I think as an offensive game planner, I think that he's done very very well. With a limited roster in the past in 2022, what he was able to do, especially after teams picked up on what he was trying to do, he adjusted mid-year. But we've talked about Brian Daboll kind of at length. There are far more reasons that I don't like him than I do like him. And I think I like him as an offensive mind and as an offensive coach. But as a head coach, I think that there are just far too many things wrong. Just to start with, he has bad relationships with his coaches.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say violent, but volatile, probably, verbally abusive relationships with his coaches. Um, he holds them to a very high standard. On the flip side, he is the opposite kind of bad relationship with his players, where he cozies up to the big players, the big name players, and he allows the animals to run the zoo a little bit.
Mhm.
And we saw the result. Like there's a lack of accountability among the players. You know, we have it sort of on good authority that when mistakes are made in practice, that there's no repercussions. There's just a lack of attention to detail. There's a general lack of preparedness. We saw it ever since 2022, right? The 2022 season is an anomaly, not just in the results, but in the approach, right? So like,
Well,
and that goes all over the place. But like, players had to earn their spots. Like Darius Slayton didn't get a starting spot till like week 5 or something like that,
mhm, mhm.
when he pretty much gave them no choice but to keep playing him. They really were adamant about him not playing, and eventually he fought his way to that. And so like there was just a total after that season and the success of that season, the approach completely changed, and it never went back to that. Like, I don't want to say necessarily that it was a tough guy situation, but players certainly had to earn their spots. And then we look at this year where they start this competition for cornerback 2 between Deonte Banks and Cordell Flott. And it's a farce of a competition because they want Banks to win it. He couldn't win it, and then they just didn't give the job to Flott when Banks didn't win it. So Flott had to continue earning that spot for like 3 or 4 weeks before they took Banks off the field. So there,
I'll tell you another one too.
yeah,
A lack of a competition. We know there was a plan for Jaxson Dart, but with hindsight being 2020, Jaxson Dart, from the minute he came on the field, was better than Russell Wilson, and
that's
there
kind of
wasn't a
true. Yeah.
competition for that. Yeah. The bottom line with him is he didn't win games. That's the most important thing, I think, why he's no longer here. We started 7-2 with him in his first year. We were 13-38-1 after that 7-2 start. Remember how we lost, what, those 4 out of 5 after the big start? We kind of, almost backed into the playoffs, and it's been awful ever since. Um, he did have some headwinds. Granted, when he got here, the roster was really awful.
Mm-hmm.
How many games and how many he coached for, what, about roughly 60 games? How many of those games did he honestly have a true starting healthy quarterback?
That's
Not
true.
nearly as many. So, you know,
It's
we
been an uphill
take
battle for him.
yeah, of course. So nobody's saying that he's just a complete fuck up. I mean, there are issues with it, but he also, willingly took this job knowing that this was going to be a rebuild and he's going to have to, but we just weren't seeing progress. A lot of it, not his fault, but a lot of it was his fault. And
Well,
it had to be done. I think we all agreed that the end of this, like you said, the end of this year would be it, and they were moving on. I think it was a foregone conclusion in my mind. He wouldn't be back, with 3 years in a row of being 2-8. Doesn't matter how you got there. 3 years in a row, we're 2-8. And yeah, you're saying it was a rage fire. I can certainly see that, but let's analyze why that was a rage fire.
well, for starters, the simple fact that he didn't win is definitely a major contributor to him being fired. But him not winning this game, I don't think necessarily, is the reason.
I think it's I think
I
this is the
think the fact
package
that
with the other blown
yeah,
double-digit leads.
I think the fourth quarter collapses are definitely part of the reason. I think that Jaxson Dart getting hurt and the optics of that, given, you know, not just in a vacuum, right? Like the idea that like it's been a national story that Jaxson Dart needs to learn how to slide. It's been a national story that Jaxson Dart takes some wicked hits. And then you have on top of that, like Jaxson Dart being checked for a concussion and Brian Daboll breaking NFL protocol. He brought, which not just is like $100,000 fine for him, and a $200,000 fine to the Giants means absolutely nothing. But it's the general optics and the shame that he brings onto the organization.
It's one of those things that becomes like a Saturday Night Live skit as opposed to just a football
Sure.
story.
Yeah, and honest to God, if they lose that game, he might have been fired then. It's just the fact that not only did they win, they beat the Eagles, and they beat them pretty soundly. So I think that story becomes one of those, like, yeah, we talked to him, it's not going to happen again, kind of, and it gets kind of pushed away out of the sunlight, and we forget about it. But those things definitely contribute. But the other thing that we didn't talk about is there is no inkling that Brian Daboll gives a shit about anything except the offense. So when you say that there has been no progress, I think that there has been progress on the offensive side of the ball. They have added the pieces and worked with them. I think that the new offensive line coach with Carmen Bracillo has done a good job with the pieces that they have there. I think that offensive line has been pretty good. I think the running back room is better, and the running game has started to look better before Cam Scadaboo got hurt. Jaxson Dart developing, some credit definitely has to go to Brian Daboll for that.
I meant
but
that
hang on.
Yeah.
However, there has been negative progress on the defensive side of the ball. We are now on our second defensive coordinator, and that, I already said, his relationship with coaches is bad. Wink Martindale shares some of the blame with that too, but that was bad. He shifts to a completely different kind of defensive coordinator. In his time, he gets hired as head coach. He's pretty much, saying that Patrick Graham is going to stay as defensive coordinator, which I think we learned later that Patrick Graham took offense to that. Like, he was absolutely not going to get a head coaching job somewhere else, so he just voluntarily left at that
Hmm.
point. Then he
Right.
takes a different kind of defensive coordinator, kind of, in Wink Martindale, and that breaks apart. Then he takes a completely different kind of. It's like he just takes a power rankings of defensive coordinators out there, their stats from the last couple of years, and that's how he decides, and he just lets them run it. And when it isn't working well, like, there's no like accountability. Like, it's almost like a not my problem
What
thing. I run the
what's
offense, which is
worse
just
is
not how it goes.
he tries to round peg it in a square hole. It's like, okay, I'm going to power rank my defensive coordinators, irregardless of what I currently have on the roster and what I'm investing in the roster. You know,
Sure.
different types of linebackers are needed, different types of secondary guys are needed. You know, hey, we loaded up on pass rushers, which would be great for Wink Martindale. So it's not just, I'm just going to pick the guy, the name that it's like, it does without any kind of fit. And a lot of this roster, decisions he's made have been about fit, not who he's been supplied, by Joe Schoen. It's by what he's done with that roster. And that's what makes it so frustrating.
Yeah, so I'm not surprised that he's fired totally, right? Like, but it is a little surprising that it happened this week, and I think that that's because it's just a bit early in the year. You know, I know that being at the top means all the responsibility stops with you, right? So like when Shane Bowen fails as a defensive coordinator or the defense fails, doesn't matter. It is also the head coach's fault. And Shane Bowen is your hire. You know what I mean? So all of it does kind of come to him, but to fire him for a fourth quarter collapse, I don't know. That does seem a little ragey to me, but I think there's the
But it's the
culmination.
fourth one.
Yeah, it's the fourth one. But
There's
again, like,
systemic things, systemic repeatable things we're seeing.
but
And
Bowen is still here.
yeah, yeah.
So I think that it has a lot to do with Jaxson Dart getting a concussion too.
Yeah, let's talk about that
Yeah,
because
because I can't stand this. So like I have a couple of positions on this. Number one, I think it is okay to have the opinion that you do not prefer quarterbacks that run because they get hurt. I think that is a perfectly fine opinion, right?
sure.
However, I do think that you take away a lot of what Jaxson Dart does to be special by being like he shouldn't run, right? So when you take a Jaxson Dart in the draft and you're like, this is going to be the future of our franchise, we're going to trade into the first round and get him. We're going to get rid of our third round pick to, move up and get this guy.
Right.
You should be doing that to do all to, amplify all the things he does well and minimize all the things he doesn't do well. So when you do that, that should, in my opinion, come with the understanding that that's going to be part of your offense. Now, if your opinion is that you don't mind that, but they're doing it too much, I really ask you, like, how much is too much? Because there were 5 designed runs in this game. 5. Okay?
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, that is not too much. Now, if you want to say they do it at times in which the game is over, I would say, okay, that's now subjective. We can decide what to talk about. And if you want to bring up the Niners game, that's fine. I'm open to, have a difference of opinion or just agree with you and be like, in that instance,
Right.
they shouldn't have done it. Fine. All that's fine. Or, then there's, I don't think it's okay to have the opinion, well, the season is lost. We should just be developing. Like, no, that's not how it works. You're not going to coach it out of him for one season and tell him to sit in the pocket only for the rest of the season because it doesn't matter anymore because we're losing. And then next year come at it again. Like, I don't agree with that. I don't think
You're
that's how
slowing
it
the
works.
development down of what he is that way. If
Yeah, I
anything.
mean, if you're developing him for his future and it's going to be part of his future, you got to keep it in there, in my opinion. I don't think you
Well,
can just turn it off. So
Grump, let me ask you a question. What do these quarterbacks have in common? Josh Allen, Jaden Daniels, Jalen Hurts, Drake May.
all of them have more rushing attempts than Jaxson Dart.
100% correct.
Now,
And
I
how many
mean,
times have you heard any of those coaches criticized for putting their quarterback at risk? And we're talking about a combination of, second year guys, veterans, MVP candidates, future of franchises, all of these different things. And how many times have you heard, a word about any of those. I think the narrative about this
It's
really comes
overblown.
down to one thing. I think that um, our coach Brian Daboll was at the point where he is hated, honestly, and Jaxson Dart is the one who is loved.
Yes.
And when you are loved, you can do no wrong in the fans' eyes and in the media's eyes too. I mean, Dart and Scattaboo kept us on the back page when this is truly a terrible team. And, Brian Dable has earned over 4 years the wrath of, this fan base, of the media and everything. So when you see something like, four, you know, protocol, concussion protocol things, that doesn't mean he had four concussions.
Right.
He got checked and was cleared 3 times for it. So, but when you looking for blame, because everything has to be assigned a blame, 99 of 100 times, the person who is hated more than one who's liked is the one who's going to catch that blame. So I think this is a perception thing that Brian Dable earned, and Jaxson Dart has earned as well. But
Yeah, I mean, I
that's
think
where
that's
the
that's
narrative is.
that's part of it too, right? Like some of these hits that Jaxson Dart takes, and we've talked about this, is like this is Jaxson Dart's fault. Like
Mhm.
he needs to learn to do this, and sometimes we had said like last week against the Niners, he was just like adding, like he was running out of bounds and then just threw a shoulder into somebody. Like that almost felt like he was frustrated.
And to me, watching Jaxson Dart play, his secret sauce running the ball is not being Tim Tebow. His special sauce is he can kind of worm his way around and get yardage and find holes and
Right.
have a little bit of a burst of speed. It's not being, okay, I'm going to barrel my way for a 3rd yard
Mhm.
instead of 2. So
Well, I
that's
mean,
something, I mean, that's on him, and he's got to figure that out, or he's going to have a very short career in this league.
yeah, so I mean, I know that people put that at the feet of Dable, where it's like, well, they have to teach him to do that or take the plays away from him. And it's like, you have to blame players for being the players that they are at some point, right? Like,
Like,
Joe Schoen gets 8,000% of the blame for Evan Neal being a bust. Why isn't it Evan Neal's fault that Evan Neal sucks? I don't
yeah,
remember hearing a bunch of people saying that Evan Neal was, a huge risk in the draft. No, like
yeah.
they took what was one of, 2 top tackles, the only one that was available to them at that time, and he didn't work out. And some of that is Evan Neal being bad. The fact that Evan Neal can't even be good on the inside shows that some of that is the player's fault. Like you can blame the players for things. It is not always the coach's fault for everything. So like
And at the end
player
of the day, players play.
right.
Players got to play. And you're right. You
And,
know,
and like I said at the beginning, like Jaxson Dart, this is who he is as a quarterback. Like using his legs, I would say between 3 and 6 times a game is absolutely controlled level of use for him.
Mhm.
Outside of quarterback scrambles that he's going to do at his discretion, which any quarterback can and should do.
Yeah, and by the
Um,
logic too, Grump, is if you're saying, no more design plays, that means you're also saying, no scrambles. And, you know, you could just as liable to get hurt on a scramble as you are on a designed run. I mean, it's not different. If anything, you're more protected. So I don't understand this logic at all. I mean,
no,
again, those quarterbacks I named before, nobody has a problem with them running.
No, and,
No,
and usually the counter argument is, well, he's not Lamar Jackson type or he's not Josh Allen size. But it's a pretty difficult argument when you start bringing Drake May into the conversation because Drake May is roughly his size, and
mhm,
he's not any faster. He doesn't have like a different skill set in that way.
right.
So
Mhm.
yeah, I think part of this is it has been poorly reported, in my opinion. It has been what I want to say. What's the word?
Parroted by the
Nah,
fan
yeah,
base.
but it's been blown for dramaticism, overblown for dramaticism, dramatic
Sure.
effect. There is a oh, man. I'm gonna think of it and scream it out later, but
Go for
yeah,
it.
um,
Amplified,
yeah. It's been amplified, but for dramatic effect. It's because it catches eyes.
dramatized,
Yeah, yeah. So I
being
don't
my
like. I
thesaurus
felt
guy.
like this was like a nuanced argument to begin with that got off on the wrong foot, and this is the worst game example of this because Jaxson Dart was sliding in this game. He didn't take any unnecessary hits, in my opinion, and then in this moment he gets tackled both of his arms go up because he fumbled to try and catch the ball in the air so he doesn't protect himself on the way to the ground on a normal
It was a
tackle.
fluky
And
play.
then his head bounced off the ground, and that's where he sustained the concussion. That is a play
See,
that could happen to a running back. That is a play that could happen to a cornerback returning an interception, a punt returner. It's a football play.
and when
And
I
this
saw it
is going to be the
originally,
smoking gun argument for Jaxson Dart needs to learn to slide. Like it's and for the record, if he doesn't get tackled there and he ends up scoring a touchdown because he already had the first down and was trying to get more yards, they might win this game. And then we're having a completely different conversation here. So it really is
well,
kind of odd.
I also think, when I saw it happen live and even the first replay, I thought it was because he got kneed in the head. Because when he went down, before he hit the ground, it looked like a defender's knee inadvertently hit him in the helmet.
Which would
So
also be another
a
fluky
football
thing.
play, yeah, an unfortunate fluky play. It's not putting yourself into danger. Like he didn't barrel his head into a flying knee.
Yeah.
The knee hit him. So either way, it was random and in the course of playing, not him trying to be Superman or trying to run through a brick wall.
Yeah, I mean, like, what's annoying to me about this is that this is a legitimate conversation that should be had, right? I agree. Jaxson Dart does take unnecessary hits. Jaxson Dart initiates contact when he shouldn't. Jaxson Dart does need to learn to slide. But where the nuance is this is the worst game example of him because he did all the right things in this game and he got hurt anyway. And this is what frustrates me about the fucking turf argument. Like, it is football. You have 300-pound people, 250-pound people running full speed, 4-4 speed at each other, colliding as part of the game. Injuries are going to happen.
And
It just
and we're
happens
also playing.
sometimes.
Go back and watch NFL films from a game from 1987 and look at all the padding they're wearing compared to what they're wearing now.
Yeah.
It's like,
They don't even
look at
wear
a
like knee
receiver.
pads anymore.
Yeah, look at a receiver and what's around his shoulders, and look what's around his waist, because they're trying to, trying to be faster and trying to gain a competitive edge. You're setting yourself. I know helmets are better than they were, 30, 40 years ago and all that, but they are susceptible to injury more because of the equipment they're wearing.
I would probably agree with that. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know. But I mean, there's certainly an argument to be had there, right? Like the shoulder pads alone are the biggest difference.
Yeah.
But in any event, Jaxson Dart is going to go through concussion protocol this week. Mike Kafka is taking over as interim head coach. Where are your thoughts landing with that?
My first thought was pretty ironic because he is a guy that was exiled by Brian Daboll, and he gets the last laugh and becomes the coach. um, he seemed like the natural guy if you're going to look for an interim coach between now and the end of the season.
He had
Um,
interviews, so
he had interviews. He was kind of a commodity for a moment. Um, if you're kind of going with the narrative, which I am, and I'll talk about later about the Jaxson Dart development, at least it's kind of, you know, that continuality a little bit for someone he's worked with during his development. But the one thing I would caution to everybody is I don't feel like this is a fair uh, interview for him or a fair
audition.
audition, because Jaxson Dart may not play this week. He may not play for a couple weeks with a concussion. There are no receivers. This team, is 2-8, and when they fire a coach, that inevitable team's quitting will happen. So I don't know what the future holds with this team of who their candidates are going to be, if they're even considering Kafka as the permanent replacement. But I think we all need to don't be judging so harshly on the rest of this season as, well, Kafka can't coach, he sucks, because there's a lot of things. Talking about headwinds, uh, he's got Hurricane Sandy worth of piss in his face coming.
So it's interesting. I obviously I would never judge like an interim head coach too harshly, right? Like I think part of the reason that Brian Daboll's gone is because the locker room is a mess right now. You have
That
players
too.
dodging interviews, screaming after games about play calls. There's Jaxson Dart himself said it in kind of a veiled way that like there's just a culture of losing going on, and they can't seem to get out of that. So it's really, and that typically is what happens when you fire a head coach mid-season. You have
Mhm.
most of those things going on, so it's really difficult to pull a team out of a rut like that. um Couple things about Mike Kafka. I've been pretty happy with the offensive play calling for the most part this year, and he's been the
Mhm.
play caller this year. um I thought that, it's come along slowly, but the way that, especially in this past game, the way that they had Jaxson Dart playing, I was a fan of. You know what I mean? He was
Mhm.
dealing. So they were in conditions that they wouldn't punt or kick field goals in. So both teams were just going for it on fourth down, and he went 19
Right.
of 29 for 242 yards in less than 4 quarters, total 4 quarters, with an additional 6 carries for 66 yards and 2 touchdowns. He was stepping back in the pocket and firing, and they were
Yeah.
looking downfield. He hit Theo Johnson for a couple of big plays, Darius Slayton for a couple of big plays. He had a beautiful ball to Daniel Bellinger that was nearly a crazy catch touchdown. And
Hmm.
and it would have been a really really good catch, but it was only possible because of a really really good throw on the move.
Exactly.
He was
Yes.
playing really really well in this game, and they finally opened up the offense and got him kind of going through the progressions. So Mike Kafka, I do think, gets a little bit of credit for that. If the
Sure.
if the credit's going to trickle down, I think that Mike Kafka deserves some credit for that. He did get coaching interviews, and I hate to, it just feels shitty to say or whatever, but like there is some portion of he technically counts as a minority candidate. So all of the interviews that he got may have just been checking boxes. I didn't look back to see which teams
But you
interviewed
know
him,
something? There's
and
I know that argument, but also there are a lot of minority coaches that
it's
could have
true.
gotten those interviews who didn't, and
That's
he
true.
did.
That's true.
Hmm.
But just something, I don't know. It's something to keep in mind because I think it keeps getting forgotten.
Hmm.
But um, Ryan Dunleavy reported that more coaching staff changes may be on the way. So if Mike Kafka seems to have some sort of control over, well, I mean, he's going to have control. Whether he's in charge of firing, he's probably going to be in control of moving the responsibilities around for who's going to do what, right? Once that
I mean,
person's
he's the head
fired. So,
coach. I
yeah,
mean, if you're even though you're the interim, you're the head coach. And, we've heard GMs in the past on different teams. I might have even heard from Daboll say, I hire the head coach and the head coach is responsible for the coaches. And, you know, it'd be interesting if he fires what's his name, the defensive coordinator right now. Be real That'd be a pretty interesting tell on how the culture was in this team before. Like as soon as he gets his first chances, well, I'm firing him, which I think is still a possibility.
it's a
I mean,
possibility.
just based on performance.
Yeah,
I
I
mean,
don't know. I mean, the other name that comes up is Shea Tierney. He was sort of Brian Daboll's right hand man. If you think back to the way they got Wink Martindale to leave rather than fire him, they got him to quit by firing Drew Wilkins, who was his right
I,
hand man, and they got him to storm out. And
I really can't wait for my closing comments about this if we're talking about Shea Tierney as well. So
okay, yeah.
it's
So
it's still tabled for later, but that
no,
is
we should get
yeah.
into that now, and then what we'll
Okay.
end on is Joe Schoen retaining his job.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, so some part of this timing of Brian Daboll's departure is odd, and that is, it sort of flies in the face of keeping him for this year when he could have and should have possibly been fired last year, right? Um, so, I mean, part of the reason you keep him is because he's supposed to be this guy with an eye for quarterbacks, and you let him pick his quarterback, and his quarterback is playing well, by the way. He's an offensive rookie of the year candidate, I would say. I guess technically that would also make him a rookie of the year candidate. Um, so his quarterback is playing well, and then you've now kicked the can. You've thrown the baby out with the bathwater, possibly.
Yeah. I Grump, I've been a Giant fan since 1981, and I've had, obviously 4 Super Bowls. I've had, the first year of Parcells. I had Ray Hanley. I've had a lot of lows, but this moment, I don't know if I've ever felt more hopeless as a Giant fan because the bigger picture to me is when you decide to fire Brian Daboll right now, I feel like this is now a completely rudderless franchise that doesn't have any direction. And let me explain what I mean by that. Like you said, really the only argument you could have had to keep Brian Daboll after 3 years, after his record being, 20 and 40 and 1, is that you hired him to be a quarterback whisperer. And, he was given the opportunity. He convinced Mara and he convinced Tish that, give me one more year. I will finally get I'll get to pick the quarterback that I want. I will get to groom it. And I said it on this show back when it happened that I actually thought that his leash would be longer and the wins and losses might be taking a back seat to that development process for the big picture. And firing him now, no matter how embarrassing this team for all the reasons we had said, you know, dealing with the coaches, the roster things, the in-game mismanagement, the clubhouse, the country club clubhouse mentality, all of these things. If the one reason you're keeping him is to have your quarterback, especially when the owner said about the previous quarterback, quote, we've done everything possible to screw this kid up. So you're telling me that a quarterback who was handpicked and was groomed in a way that he wasn't being groomed to start on day one. There was a plan that they kind of fast forwarded to get him in early. And, things were looking good. I'm not ready to say he doesn't need any more coaching or anything, or he's going to be the second coming of Jesus Christ. So far, so good. To bounce him after 7 starts, just it just comes to me, it's just from the top, is that you are too worried about perception. You are too worried about what the media says. You're too worried about airplanes flying around. You you are still worrying about this, the small picture things, when the biggest thing for this, the most important things on a team are coach and quarterback. And looks like we have one. And even if you keep this guy for 5 more games, and then you whack him another month and a half, 2 months of coaching reps with a guy, would make him incrementally better than he will be, for at the end of this year, I think. So it's just really depressing to me that we're at this state. And other than Jaxson Dart, and even with Jaxson Dart, I still have my hope scale with him as 9 out of 10 because he has suffered a lot of injuries and he plays with this reckless abandonment now that I can't guarantee that he's going to be the quarterback in 4 years or be healthy or something. I like to think so, but even that gives me a little bit of nerves. So I'm just really in a very dark place right now with this franchise that, you know, hopefully the next guy comes in and turns everything around and we can sit back and laugh at this moment. But I am I am really just hands in the air right now.
So this will probably transition well into the Shane is being retained part of this episode, but
Yes.
I'll agree with you because I agree that I thought the way things were phrased and the way things made sense to me was wins and losses meant less this year, and it was more about what the team looked like, right? And the early returns I thought were pretty good. This was the first time we got to see the offensive line they put together last year stay healthy together and play together, and with a quarterback that sat in the pocket well.
Mhm.
And they looked good, right? This offensive line does look above average. Not saying it's great, not saying it's top 5 in the league, but I'm saying it's probably above top 15, maybe like 14, 13, so above
I would
average.
say more passing wise than run blocking. But yeah,
Sure. Yeah,
I'll agree
correct.
with
Yeah.
that.
But that's also kind of what I expected. That's kind of what they assembled, was a pass blocking unit. But regardless,
Mhm. Mhm.
um, that was going well. Jaxson Dart seemed to be developing well. He certainly was a spark plug. Overall, other additions to the team like Cam Scadaboo continued to look good as well. On the offense, things looked good. Defense was a mess, and I'm not absolving that, but I had also said at the beginning of the year, if this team is losing games, you know, 34-33, I would be okay with that. And that's sort of kind of what happened. You know, they lost to Dallas in that regard. They lost to Denver in that regard. They were scoring points.
If
So
you didn't know what happened in those games and you saw that, that's a
but
lot
that's
different than
but
what happened.
no, it's not, because the point is that the offense was improved. The offense was scoring points. I had said this from the beginning. I don't care if the defense is bad, because you can fix the defense in a year if you have an offense that does well. Number one, an offense that scores points helps the defense. Number two, on the free agent market, defenders want to go to a team that's going to contend. What teams contend? Teams that score points. Okay? So you can attract more talent to your team in the offseason when, you're just like, I'm going to buy free agent pieces for this defense and we'll figure it out. You know what I mean? Like, the defense is easier to flip over the course of a year. The offense is harder, because the offense, at least,
you need a quarterback.
It's either the quarterback that's the problem, which is incredibly hard to get or expensive to get, or it's your offensive line that's the problem. And that's 5 pieces that you have to figure out, which becomes expensive. It takes a lot more assets, and sometimes there's just not stuff available. So it's just easier to fix a defense, in my opinion, than an offense. So, yes, the way that those games ended, there's plenty of blame to go around. That could be a whole other conversation. But just in general, that perception of what I expected to be like acceptable, not good, not what you want, but acceptable. I can accept the fact that we're losing games in this regard, and the team looks like this. The defense is bad. The offense is scoring points. We have our quarterback of the future on his rookie deal. That, to me, was the minimum for what they were hoping for this year. Now, obviously, the conversation is more nuanced than that. Like I said, Brian Daboll has this laundry list of things that he was never good at and hasn't gotten better at. There's been no self-reflecting and changing. He still has shitty relationships with his coaches. I think, it's a lot less in the news, but the way Shane Bowen came out like a pussy in front of a press conference and blamed himself for everything tells me that he was put in a corner and screamed at.
He's a psychopath. He's got to say the right thing to save his job.
Yeah, and when we see the blowups on the sideline with Brian Daboll, like, I get that. Like, Harbaugh's the same way. He storms around, but these things don't exist in a vacuum. Harbaugh wins consistently. Brian Daboll hasn't consistently. And there's a myriad of other things. Like, he hasn't gotten better at dealing with his players. He's not a disciplinarian. Whatever. So there are other reasons to fire Brian Daboll. I just thought it was going to happen at the end of the year. You know what I mean? Like, it made more sense to me that you have him for this whole year to develop Dart. And I don't think that Jaxson Dart is the kind of player, from what I've seen thus far, from what I've learned about him, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that needs to have one coach for the rest of his life.
No.
I think that one season with Brian Daboll probably gets him to be, a workable NFL quarterback, right? And especially because he seems to be getting better week after week. Whereas you go back to Daniel Jones, he didn't get better at things week to week, and we didn't expect that from him either, right? But
right.
he kind of was what he was. And there weren't really high point totals. It wasn't really like that.
Well, Grump, what you're saying, I agree with, but I think it's more like, I agree with doesn't need to have one coach his entire career. But so that to me is like, I had no problem, launching him after the season. We go on to year 2. To me, it's middle of season.
That's where I'm agreeing with you.
That's the thing.
That's where I'm going to agree with you, because middle of the season, again, if there was something that happened, if he has like a blow up, if he goes into the tent again, or if he's flipping out and pushing referees, or some other bad optical thing, where it's just like, this is bad for our organization, like, this is another incident with this fucking guy, and he's screaming at his head coach on the sideline. It's on Sunday Night Football. Chris Collinsworth is talking about it, and now it's on the Monday Morning News.
That's why
that sort of thing.
What you said before, it doesn't matter if they blow leads or not. I mean, losses, there's different types of perception for losses. A team that sucks, whatever, they're 2-8, we don't care about them, but these are spectacularly embarrassing losses.
Well,
and that perception, I think, hurts an organization too.
Of course it does, but like I said, so the defense argument is twofold. Like, on the one hand, I still stand by everything I said. Like, if the defense stinks, it's so much faster and easier to fix than it is an
Yeah.
offense, right? So, I mean, if it stinks, it stinks, right? And I think in the Dallas game, the problem is that they collectively as coaches went soft in games where they had leads and they allowed teams to come back. So, you know, your offense went a little bit soft in the Denver game. Your defense completely fell apart. The Dallas game, they were playing soft at the end of half and at the end of the game. So it wasn't just that the defense stunk. Like, if basically in my argument for, you know, the offense scoring points but still losing, you know, it was more like if they kept if games were going like 7-0, 7-7, 14-7, 14-14, and then you're not the one who possesses the ball last at the end of the game, then it's just like, well, the defense is just bad, we need to fix it. But it's part of the larger thing with Brian Daboll is that it doesn't seem like he gives a shit about defense. Let's go
to special teams, because, you know, a big piece of that into that fourth quarter collapse on Sunday was a shank punt.
I hate to do that, though, because I actually think that the special teams has been good this year. It was an incredibly windy day. Jamie Gillen is a good punter. It was, I think it's
all true, but that did help lead
of
to
course.
the loss.
But again, it's one of those things where I'm just not going to blame Brian Daboll for that. I'm not
either.
Yeah.
No. I wasn't.
No, but I mean, like, the general not giving a fuck. Like, so if you want to do the special teams not giving a fuck, then we can have the Graham Gano conversation again. You know what I mean?
Yes,
which we don't need to.
That's where this fits in.
But that's where the special teams thing fits in for me. And again, like, it's a little cloudy. It's a little murky. Is that Joe Schoen or is that Brian Daboll? But, like...
And I'll go a step further, Grump. You know, he doesn't give a fuck about defense. He doesn't give a fuck about special teams. I don't think he gives a fuck about wide receivers.
I don't understand that. Like, so, like, at some point, like, this kicker thing is on Brian Daboll, right? Like, it's up to him whether he wants to go with Younghoe Koo or Jude McAtamy or Graham Gano. And they've been pretty much wrong at guessing which one they had to go to every single time. So some of that decision has to be Brian Daboll. End of story. You know, if it's Joe Schoen's fault that they decided to stay with Graham Gano this year, fine. I'll have that argument with anybody. Absolutely.
Right.
That's a terrible offense. But, you know, those game day decisions... And, you know, Brian Daboll's the one who talks to and sees these players every single day. Graham Gano consistently getting hurt in fucking warm-ups and starting the first week of practice after training camp. Pat Leonard is reporting that he doesn't even have his helmet on. Like, what's going on with Graham Gano?
In warm-ups. I mean,
he hurt his neck
things.
Lifting? Like, why are you even lifting? Like, I feel like you're doing shoulder shrugs. Like, kick the fucking ball, man. You have, like, 2 more years of this. It just, you know, it's a whole thing. But, yeah, I think if the defensive, like, it's the fact that they collapsed and there's the larger perception that he doesn't give a shit about defense that puts it together. Like I said, if they were like, you're just not the last one to possess the ball at the end of the game, and that's why you lost a game 47-42, then that's just a bad defense. It's more than that. I don't think that this defense is bad. I think that it's not good. I think it's coached by somebody who's also not good, and I think that they've done a poor job of finding cheap depth.
I think it's an incomplete on the secondary because of all the injuries. I think the run defense is bad. There's no two ways about it.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, the run defense is a little bit affected by the fact that Micah McFadden hasn't really played a single down. You know, that's definitely part of it. I think also schematically there's some reasons that the run defense isn't good. I don't think it's just players. Like, but I do think
that's fair. But it doesn't matter, man. We're just talking about just grade, you know, this defense and what it is. You know, I give much more of a pass to the secondary, you know, in the the back end than I do the defensive line and the rush defense overall.
That's fair. Yeah. But again, like this, the fact that their depth are practice squad, special teams, and like 7th round picks from this year, that's the depth in the secondary. Some of that's the coach's fault. I'm sorry. Like, you need to pound the table for like a Fabian Moreau who was signed like the last week of training camp and ended up being starter at cornerback 2 for like a whole year under Wink Martindale. Like those kinds of guys, those really cheap veteran signings, they should be your depth. Just because you signed a guy to 7, like the world didn't come falling apart when the Jets took Corey Black. Okay, in fact, we ended up getting him back. So it's okay if you lose your 7th round picks out for proven veterans that have lost a step and aren't your starters anymore. Like your depth shouldn't be all guys whose main role is a gunner on punts or running down kickoffs. Those guys should be doing that. They should not be your first guy up when someone gets hurt in the secondary. And that's the situation that they're in. And I think that part of that is the head coach just not giving a shit about that or about wide receiver.
A special teams guy playing wide receiver when, we have a quote-unquote untradeable Jalen Hyatt. Can't trade him.
But you also have Lil Jordan Humphrey too, who you decided to stick with this year. You know what I mean? That's your training camp cut down decision that you decided that this guy was worth keeping, and now you'd rather have Gunnar Olszewski not just play, but play outside receiver. Like he's not even playing in the slot. He's playing where Lil Jordan Humphrey should be. In that game, at least 2, because they were back to back,
which is 3 too many.
Yeah, you're not wrong. So bringing this into the Joe Schoen staying situation, he's staying for now. I'm gonna defend it a little bit because, by the way, the word I was looking for was sensationalized.
Okay.
The arguments about Jaxson Dart taking unnecessary hits were definitely sensationalized. I think the Joe Schoen conversation is also sensationalized a little bit. And then this is not someone that I'm fighting to keep, but this idea that it's like a lame duck, like the general manager, you hire a general manager to put together a staff and like a head coach and a roster. So like, this idea of like a lame duck, they have to be a package deal, and this is the 3rd lame duck situation. To me, I don't agree with that. Like I just don't. Is it stupid that Joe Schoen came in and like half-assed a head coaching search when he pretty much knew he was walking in with Brian Daboll? Yeah, I think that was bad process, but I think it was also kind of a,
unless you like Brian Daboll too when you're going through the process and you're fine with it. I mean, maybe
But at the end of the day, like I don't think that this is a must fire the GM because you fired the head coach and you're making a lame duck scenario. I don't think that matters. I think that there's definitely some shenanigans that I don't like going on with finger pointing, right? Like the way articles were coming out for the Post, defending Joe Schoen before Brian Daboll even got fired, but just this idea that Jaxson Dart was not entirely Brian Daboll's decision. Joe Schoen had to trade up in the draft to get him, and it's like there are plenty of reports. And
what was the article last week, Grump? It said something like, "Don't assume it's a package deal if one gets fired."
All of the dominoes were being set already. Yeah, the dominoes were set up. They were waiting for the finger flick to knock him over. That's what's slimy, right? Like this is just. It's very whack that this was all being carefully put together for the bad news to come down, and someone's going to be hands off, absolved.
Was that the Post just trying to get their own clicks, or are they being fed?
No, I think they're being fed. It was all things that I could have guessed would have happened, and all the things that I could have guessed would have been said. So I'm not defending Joe Schoen, but I do think that there's a lot of unfair or stupid arguments being made. Number one, his drafts. I think his drafts are average. I think that they're not terrible. They're not great.
Hey, I mean, the most important pieces of this team this year, and the only reason there's any optimism for this team were a 6th-round draft pick who would at running back, we didn't even think was even going to, have much of a factor, and a quarterback who was, ahead of schedule and playing well. He gets credit for those things, and Jaxson Dart is going to be the biggest needle mover on this team going forward, even more than, an Evan Neal pick, even more than a Kayvon Thibodeau pick, even more than an Abdul Carter pick. At the end of the day, quarterback is it. And if you have one of those guys with it, that covers up for a lot of different works that you may have.
Yeah. So
And
I mean,
also, here's the thing, Grump, is let's compare where we are right now to day one when, he took over for Gettleman. We're in better shape in the cap.
oh,
You know,
definitely. That's
we're
without a
better
doubt. And
shape with
that's
draft
the
picks.
thing that's
We're
not being talked about at all is that he came into like a hellfire of a cap situation after this year. This includes what I would consider like a Joe Schoen misstep was the Daniel Jones contract. That's like completely off the books next year. There are
Mhm.
no problems with the cap for the next 2 years. For the next 2 years, your biggest cap hits are your best players on your team. So there's no dead weight. There's no bad contracts in here. There's nothing you can't get out of or have to worry about on the books. And
And
that
your
was a
franchise
huge,
quarterback is getting paid hardly anything. So
yeah,
you have the ability to get other players around him.
absolutely. And you already have a backup quarterback under contract too. So you have two quarterbacks
Yep.
under contract for fairly cheap. It is one of those things that is monumentally important and is a slow process. There are some things that you just can't do quickly, and clearing up the cap is a really difficult one to do. In
Yep.
terms of the roster, um, I don't really remember exactly who was a free agent at the end of that year, but I mean, you're looking at Jake Fromm, Mike Glennon, Barkley, Devontae Booker, Colin Gillespie as fullback, Kenny Galladay, Colin Johnson, John Ross, David Sills, Darius Slayton, Kadarius Toney, who he traded away, Evan Ingram, and Kyle Rudolph. I mean, this is not a good roster.
Yeah.
This is a really tough roster to go
I mean,
through.
the two quarterbacks, obviously, because Jones was hurt, but
Yeah.
I mean, but other of those guys, that's not good. This roster is better than that roster. I mean, now you can make the case. It's been 4 years.
And it
Shouldn't
is
it be better?
inevitable. It is
Yeah.
inevitable to get more talent. That's true. But at the end of the day, and again, I'm not defending Joe Schoen. I just think that these are points that are like being just blown over like they mean nothing, and they do mean something. Like at the end of the day,
Yeah.
this team is better now than it was then. It's not just that they have talent now. They are better now than they were then. And he is a better GM than Dave Gettleman. Again,
Well,
everybody always says GM and immediately starts talking about the draft like it's the only fucking thing on earth that GMs do. Dave Gettleman was not a terrible drafter. You can make the argument he was a better drafter than Joe Schoen if you want to. I don't even give a shit. I think it's a wash. Dave Gettleman was bad at the free agency process.
well,
Period.
here's the
End
thing
of
too.
story.
Here's the thing I was thinking of is like when he took over after that horrible Gettleman roster you just did, they have to blow up the roster.
Yeah.
So it's what type of coach are you trying to get? It's different than now, where I don't feel like this is a blow up the roster. Your
It's
quarterback is in
not.
place. You have an identity what this offense is. So now, you know, you can be more selective of who you want to be your head coach and other coaches. You're not going on, you don't have to go necessarily on limb for guy. It's like
Yeah.
we we need to find we need to find a coach now that's going to fit the skill set of what makes this quarterback go. And this team looks like it's going to be, with Scadaboo, a little more of a power team than some other teams. This is not going to be an air raid team. On defense, this looks like a team that's going to be very aggressive going after the quarterback. So, you can tailor your hires to what you have as opposed to we're blowing this whole thing up and we're starting it basically as an expansion team all over again.
Yeah.
So it's a different skill set, and nobody knows that current roster right now more than Joe Schoen does. So I think he deserves a shot at a second hire.
I don't
And
know about
again, if it's,
that. I'm not saying what he deserves. He probably deserves to be
I
fired at the
mean,
end of the year. But I also people are acting like
strong
it's
word
the end
deserves.
of the world. Like this is a catastrophic set us back situation because we have this another lame duck scenario. Like I just don't think any of that shit matters. Again, like
Agree.
should this roster be better than it is after 4 years? I 100% agree with that. Absolutely. There's a lot on the back end. The depth is terrible. The wide receiver room is bad. They have you said that this roster is better in all these different ways because they have these identities. It's all true, but at the same time, there is still so much that needs to be fixed. There's at least 6 positions that need to be upgraded this offseason. At least
And
six,
they
really
almost
more
all
7.
need depth too.
Yeah,
They're all even the
absolutely.
parts that are okay are paper thin.
Yeah.
Soon as
So
Scottaboo left, there was no more running game,
there
for
there's
example.
there's still plenty of reasons to say Joe Schoen should be fired, and that's fine. I just don't agree that it needs to be a package deal or that this is setting themselves further back. I don't think that this sets them further back. Maybe they're missing out on, like, again, if there's like some GM person that you think really should be the GM, I'm open to that conversation.
Go for it. Go
Yeah,
get him.
and again, like, he could
But
still
it
be
better
fired
be
at the
it
end of
better
the
be a
year.
guy that it better be a guy you're very confident in. You have, not, well, this guy was an assistant personnel development guy. We're gonna make him the GM. It has to be somebody, you want and you think is can do the job. Now that it's over, the partnership between Shane and Brian Daboll, do you think that partnership was as smooth as could have been? Do you think it was, do you think they were always in lockstep?
No, I don't. I mean, I think that, and I don't really know if one or the other was right more often, or if they were possibly both wrong at
You're making
times.
my argument, but keep going.
Yeah, I do think that there were some roster differences, um, in terms of players. Right, we had reports that, like, people in the building wanted Shedeur Sanders. There were plenty of reports, and so
Mhm.
that's also part of the important thing of Joe Schoen taking credit for getting Jaxson Dart. Does he deserve some credit? Absolutely, because he had to make it happen. Like, he had to trade up to get him and make sure that all happened, and that's some pretty good GMing right there.
Well,
But at
you're
the same
making my
time,
point.
he's just doing
Well,
it for his coach. He wanted Shedeur Sanders, possibly, which, I mean, that, at least right now today, looks like would have been a disastrous decision.
yeah. Um, you're making my point because everybody assumes, well, you can't have a lame duck. They have to be together because they're going to be lockstep. There's never a guarantee that,
No.
even from day one, just because they came in at the same time and he hired them, that they're going to be lockstep with anything.
Yeah.
So that's just, again, that's another myth I think that's out there.
I think there is still a chance that Joe Schoen gets fired at the end of the year. But, I don't know. One
I don't think it's tied to if they lose the rest of their games or not. I think it's just if they decide they want to make a philosophical change and start and just blow everything out.
Yeah. And the other thing that I think people just don't realize is a big deal is that Joe Schoen isn't part of the Giants family. When he was hired, that was a big moment for John Mara. He went outside the norm for what this family has done for decades in hiring
Mhm.
from within their organization and moving people up. Jerry Reese was someone who moved up through the system. So when there was a lame duck sort of scenario where you have coaches being fired and whatever, with retaining the GM, then you have Dave Gettleman, who was another one who, even though he was with Carolina, he came up through the Giants scouting department. He was part of their family. It's why they let him retire instead of firing him. Joe Schoen came in and had to convince the Maras to blow up their entire front office. They completely gutted the place in the scouting department. They modernized everything. Like, this was a huge shift that they did. So it's not surprising to me. And again, this isn't a defense of him, but I don't think people realize how big of a deal that had to be. Like,
Mhm.
it's not surprising to me that they moved on from a head coach and didn't necessarily walk away from the entire GM. Like, this coach was not,
This
despite
is
everything
an
we said, the coach wasn't a catastrophic failure. He was coach of the year in his first year with the team. If there was an absolute joke and he was out in the middle of his second year, then we have a completely different scenario where you're like, this GM made a horrible head coach decision. Did Brian Dable turn out to
again,
be a bad
I
head
think both
coach?
I
Yeah,
think both
but
things can be true. I think that both things can be true. I don't think it was a horrible mistake hiring, but I would say he was close to a catastrophic failure in
he
spite
he
of the
he.
first year.
I see. This is where I disagree. Catastrophic failure to me is like, he was an embarrassment. He was out the like out the door so fast. There are guys that are one and done coaches. There are other guys
Yeah,
that barely make it through their second year. You
he's
can make
not
an
Urban Meyer catastrophic failure.
exact. That's a catastrophic
He's
failure.
a
Brian,
okay. He's a
he's a
failure. He's
regular
not a
failure.
catastrophic failure.
But there,
I'll give you
there are
that.
regular failures with head coaches all the time. GMs
Yeah,
get to keep their job, right? When
yeah.
head coaches fail. So I mean, like,
Mhm.
Yes, it's a failure, but it wasn't if it were a catastrophic failure, there'd be no good graces on to keep leeching on to make it 4 years.
Well, to your
Um,
point, GM shouldn't be just solely based on the draft. GM should also be solely based on who they hire for head coach.
I
It's
mean,
a
GMs
combination of
have
a
a
lot of things.
huge job. Their job is to get the head coach. Their job is to assemble a roster. Their job is to do the draft. Their job is to keep the
Manage the
cap under
cap.
control. It is not the draft is always the first thing that fans bring up when they start talking about a GM being good or bad, and it's just the silliest thing to me because on top of it only being a portion of their job, it's the biggest part of the job that's a fucking guess. It's a lot of guessing. All it
Yeah.
is guessing. People are
Hey,
wrong on draft
you're
picks
there.
all the time.
You're at the Senior Bowl. You're on your ground zero. You talk to people the entire time you're there. How many times have you heard the exact same opinion about any player? Everybody has a different.
Oh yeah, there are
It
people,
happens all the time. And
especially
these
at the
guys
Senior
are
Bowl.
professional scouts.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, the draft is like it is. It's certainly a point against Joe Schoen, in my opinion. I don't think he's been great at it. I think he's just been average. Um, but it's like a lot of GMs are average at the draft. There's so much more to GMing than the draft. If you're great at drafting, you're probably going to end up being a good GM. But like usually being great at drafting comes with starting with a good roster or assembling a good
Yeah.
roster first, and then it's like you just have to nail the couple of picks to fill the couple of spots, or you're free to just draft superstars as they fall to you because your roster's already fucking good. So it's not that
Right.
hard to be good at drafting and just continue doing stuff. It's Howie Roseman's been pretty good just because he keeps picking media darlings.
But
So and because he's had a good roster for a number of years now. You can stack up more and more years as a drafter where you're just free to do whatever you want in the draft.
right, right.
So, yeah, it's a little bit silly. The Joe Schoen thing, I'm sure we're going to keep talking about throughout the rest of this year and whether or not he should keep his job. But I do think that there's a lot of really bad arguments out there, and that
Yeah.
drives me a little bit crazy. But I'm not really the biggest fan of Joe Schoen. But he has done some things correctly. He's definitely brought this team out of the dark age.
I think
Which,
this,
by the way, it's okay to say, "Oh, great, he brought us to the modern world of drafting and he gutted the room. Thank you very much. We don't need your services anymore." That's a perfectly good counter argument to that.
sure,
Like
sure.
that doesn't buy you, your job for the next 6 years because you modernized our shit. Now that it's in the
I
real
just don't want
world,
to
we
get
can
into.
move on.
I just don't want to have the argument or the discussion every single week of the state of Joe Schoen going forward
No,
because
and I already feel
GMs are
like a
not
fucking
coaches.
plane's gonna fly, which is gonna drive me nuts.
Oh, it's happening. But I mean, like, even I don't even like doing it for coaches on a week by week basis. It should be an accumulation of data points from his entire time. With a
Mhm.
GM, a GM doesn't really affect Sunday.
Yeah,
What happens in the third quarter. Like,
a
oh, the
huge
pass
portion of
rush
his
wasn't good.
job is over during the season.
Exactly.
Um. So,
Do we
yeah,
do we want to get into in future episodes who would be interested in as our coaching candidates, or are we still kind of assessing the damage right now?
yeah, I definitely want to wait because the
Yeah,
reports coming out now are definitely, um, they're either. First of all, it's preliminary, even if you're hearing it from within the organization. Like, there's rumors that
right.
it's going to be Mike McCarthy, which is going to make me shred the little bit of hair left on my head out of my scalp.
Do you, do you want me to go full nuclear like you've never heard me before? What's what's the name that's been floated already that would just
Oh,
make me.
Kiffin.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's bad enough. It's me versus the world that every Florida fan wants Kiffin to be their coach. If all of a sudden, because he coached the quarterback that makes a horrible coach qualified to be our coach, I will. I don't think I can. I might spontaneously combust if we have Jameis Winston and Lane Kiffin on the same team. That might be the end of me.
Yeah, I mean, basically, my point is that a lot of the names being floated around are like the easiest possible connections to make. They're the biggest names
Right.
or the ones who have a connection to something, right? So, like, John Gruden's been floated around. It's like, That's why I'm. Let's hold it off until we hear. And
Sure.
even if those are being leaked out of the front of, like Gary Myers said something that tells me that it came from somewhere, that's still preliminary. People just talking in the building. That's not
Right.
doing real interviews or anything like that. When it gets to the end of the year and we're at that point, we'll have a deeper conversation then.
Can I ask you one more question before we kind of wrap this up and talk about, the here and now? Do you see any immediate changes that might happen next week as a result of Kafka being the coach?
As a result of Kafka being the coach, not really. No, I don't think so. Um,
He-
However, if Jaxson Dart clears concussion protocol, there's probably less designed runs. Just as, but
Oh,
but but that to me has less to do with Brian Daboll not being there and more to do with just general optics.
my prediction will be the one major change you will see is Jameis will be the number two quarterback
Oh
in
yeah.
Russell Wilson. And if Jackson Dart can't go, he starts. I don't think that happens if Dable is still here.
You think
I
so?
think now that, yeah,
Well, that's curious. You think that Daboll had like some affinity to Russell Wilson
I
over
do.
Jameis Winston?
I do. I think for whatever reason, he brought him in here. I didn't like the fact they brought him in the first place. I thought he was washed. He's as of Sunday, he still came in. And he was still, the active backup quarterback. I think he would have stuck with him. I think his plan when the season started was to have Russell Wilson be the starter until no more. He's the
Mm-hmm.
one who got all the reps back then. He's the one who's more prepared. I think he would have put him in. I think Kafka, different perspective doesn't owe Russell Wilson a thing, and I think he's going to go because as much as I don't like Jameis, I trust him more than Russell Wilson right now to get me a win in a week or at least have this offense functional. Offense is not functional with Russell Wilson right now.
That's true. All right, so that's going to do it for this episode. We will be back at our normal Tuesday morning next week following the Giants Packers game.
Y- Yeah, and for a lot of we're gonna have a lot of probably new listeners because of all the big news.
Mm.
Tell everybody where you are when you're
Oh, yeah.
not
Yeah,
snuggled
so
with me.
yeah, I'm also on the co-host for the Giants Nation show, so you can find me on there at like 3 nights a week. We'll do we've done preview podcasts on Thursday, previewing the upcoming game. Those release on Friday morning. We have a mailbag every week that release on Wednesday morning. On the day of the game, we'll usually go live at like 11:15, something like that, just to clean up any game day news that's coming out. We guess the inactives, and then we recap the game following Sunday live for patrons, I think, and then just that post on Monday morning. So I'm on Giants Nation show 3 times a week, 4 if you count the live for the game day preview, and then this show, of course, with the Cranky fan, my brother. So um, yeah, that's where you
Oh,
can find us.
real quickly, for Sunday, the Packer game, I don't think we're gonna get that interim kind of bounce. And if Jackson Dart doesn't play, I think there's absolutely zero chance we win. I think we get blown out.
Yeah, if Jackson, I mean, it's too early to give a real prediction because we don't know anything
Right.
about Jackson Dart's
Yeah,
health.
it's off the board right now. But
Yeah, I think this is a loss no matter what. This team is really hurt. Green Bay needs
mm,
a get right game pretty badly, and I think they'll get it. So
they've lost to some pretty bad teams this year, though, so it's possible. But I just can't see it.
yeah,
I'm debating even going. I gave Cranky wife and her friend my tickets, and I was going to get another one from our friends at 124. But I might just go to
stay
Atlantic City
warm.
instead. Yeah, well, I'll be at the Florida Ole Miss game on Saturday, so I'll be watching one ass kicking. So I might just go to Atlantic City on Sunday and bet all red. I don't know.
All right, that's gonna do it for this episode. We will see you guys next week. Until then, go
Go
Giants.
Giants.